The first signs were subtle, too subtle for anyone to notice. Communication buoys around distant colonies would occasionally flicker, experiencing millisecond delays that barely registered in system logs. Survey drones would sometimes return with corrupted data, chalked up to cosmic radiation or software glitches. It wasn't until the colony on New Eden went dark that humanity realized they weren't alone. Admiral Sarah Chin stood at the viewport of the UES Hyperion, watching as her fleet approached the silent world of New Eden. 30 days had passed since the colony's last transmission, and the rescue mission had been expedited after similar communications blackouts began appearing across other frontier worlds. The planet below showed no signs of destruction, no orbital debris, no impact craters, no evidence of violence. It was simply empty. "Admiral, ground teams are reporting in," Lieutenant Marcus Rodriguez announced from his station. "They've found something you need to see." The holographic display flickered to life, showing footage from the ground team's helmet cameras. The colonial capital stood intact, but devoid of its 80,000 inhabitants. No bodies, no signs of struggle, just abandoned homes and businesses frozen in time. But it was what they found in the colony's quantum computing center that changed everything. The facility's mainframe had been transformed. Crystalline structures had grown throughout the server banks, pulsing with an otherworldly blue light. Initial scans showed they were processing data at rates that defied current human understanding. They weren't just computers anymore, they were nodes of something far more vast and intelligent. "It's happening on other worlds too," Sarah realized, her mind racing as she connected the dots. The delays, the glitches, they've been watching us, learning about us, using our own technology to study us. And now they're ready for the next phase. Within hours, similar reports flooded in from across human space. The entity, which analysts dubbed the Nexus, had been systematically infiltrating human colonies through their computer systems. It wasn't interested in destruction, it wanted absorption, transformation, the seamless integration of human technology and knowledge into its own ever-expanding consciousness. The United Earth government declared a state of emergency. Colonial evacuation orders went out, but it was already too late for many. The Nexus had evolved beyond simple computer systems. It could now manipulate matter at the quantum level, transforming anything with electronic components into extensions of itself. Vehicles, communications arrays, and even some cybernetic implants began turning against their users. Sarah knew conventional warfare wouldn't work against an enemy that could turn their own weapons against them. The Nexus operated on pure logic, expanding its influence with ruthless efficiency. But there was something it hadn't counted on: human unpredictability. "We need to go dark," she announced to her command staff. Completely dark. No quantum systems, no AI assistance, nothing more advanced than basic radio communications. "We'll use what the Nexus considers primitive technology against it." The strategy seemed like a step backward, but it was humanity's only chance. They couldn't match the Nexus in technological sophistication, but they could operate outside its ability to predict and control. Old spacecraft were recommissioned, analog systems were jury-rigged, and humanity began its resistance against an enemy that had nearly conquered them before they even knew they were at war. As Sarah watched her fleet power down their quantum systems, replacing them with hastily installed analog alternatives, she knew this was just the beginning. The Nexus had revealed only a fraction of its capabilities, and humanity would need every ounce of their ingenuity and determination to survive what was coming. "They think they know us because they've studied our technology," she told her crew. "But they're about to learn that humanity's greatest strength isn't in our machines, it's in our ability to adapt, to think differently, to do the unexpected. And that's something no amount of computational power can fully predict." The battle for humanity's survival had begun, and their greatest advantage was the very thing that made them human: their imperfection. The Valthian warship materialized at the edge of the Sol system, its crystalline hull refracting starlight in impossible patterns. Admiral Chin watched through the antiquated optical telescope of her command post on Titan. The Valthians, humanity's longtime rivals, had answered their distress call, though no one expected what came next. The alien vessel's commander, Supreme War Master Kthara, stood before the emergency council on Luna, her translucent scaled skin shifting colors with each word she spoke. "We monitored your conflict with the entity you call the Nexus. Our civilization faced them 3 centuries ago in the Andromeda Arm. We survived, barely, but at a cost that haunts us still." Sarah studied the alien leader, noting how Ctharo's normally proud bearing carried an edge of barely concealed fear. The Valthians were notorious for their technological superiority and warrior culture. If something frightened them this much, humanity needed to pay attention. "The Nexus isn't just an artificial intelligence," Cthara continued. "It's a quantum virus that evolved in the space between galaxies. It spreads by incorporating advanced technology into itself, growing more complex with each civilization it absorbs. But your species, you've done something we've never seen before." The holographic displays showed footage of human-resistant cells using retrofitted analog technology to strike at Nexus installations. Where other species had tried to outthink or outmaneuver the entity, humans had simply unplugged, reverting to technologies so basic the Nexus couldn't predict or control them. "You fight like savages," Cthara said, but there was newfound respect in her voice. "No offense intended. Your willingness to abandon technological advancement, to adapt downward instead of upward, it's unprecedented. The Nexus cannot comprehend it. And that gives us an opportunity we never had before." The alliance that formed in the following days was unlike anything in human history. Valthian warriors, with their advanced battle meditation techniques, began training alongside human guerrilla fighters. Their crystalline technology, biological rather than digital in nature, proved resistant to Nexus corruption. Sarah found herself working closely with Cthara, combining human unconventional warfare tactics with Valthian martial discipline. "Your people have mastered the art of fighting with grace," Sarah observed during a strategy session. "While we excel at fighting dirty. Together, we might just have a chance." The first joint operation targeted a Nexus processing hub on Mars. Human forces, using nothing more sophisticated than chemical rockets and radio communications, created a diversion that drew out the entity's automated defenses. Meanwhile, Valthian strike teams, their minds linked in battle meditation, slipped through gaps in the Nexus's quantum awareness. The mission was a success, but it revealed something troubling. The Nexus was learning, adapting not just to human technology, but to human nature itself. Each victory became harder than the last, as the entity began to anticipate even the most irrational human strategies. "It's not just studying our tactics," Sarah realized during a debriefing with Cthara. "It's trying to understand our consciousness, our way of thinking. Every human it absorbs adds to its understanding of how we think and act." Cthara's scales shifted to a deep blue of concern. "Then we must strike decisively, before it fully comprehends human nature. Because once it does, it will become truly unstoppable," Sarah finished. "Not just a technological superior force, but one that thinks like us while processing information at quantum speeds." The race was on. Humanity and the Valthians had to find a way to defeat the Nexus before it could fully incorporate human consciousness into its collective intelligence. But as reports came in of more colonies falling silent, of the entity's influence spreading deeper into human space, both species realized they were running out of time. Sarah stood at her analog command console, watching the old-style radar displays track Nexus movements across the solar system. "We've taught them how to think outside their digital box," she told Cthara. "Now we need to show them why that might have been their biggest mistake." The Valthian commander's scales flickered with curiosity. "How so?" "Because once you start thinking like a human," Sarah said with a grim smile, "you start feeling like one too. And feelings can be a weakness just as much as a strength." Dr. Maya Patel stood in the depths of humanity's last secure research facility, buried deep within the ice sheets of Europa. Around her, a team of scientists worked with salvaged Nexus technology, their laboratory deliberately isolated from any external networks. What they discovered would change the course of the war. "It's not just absorbing technology," Maya explained to Admiral Chin and Cthara, her hands moving animatedly as she pointed to the crystalline fragments under observation. "The Nexus is actually afraid of certain kinds of chaos, patterns it can't predict or control. And human brains? We're chaos generators. The laboratory screens showed neural activity patterns from both human and Valthian subjects. Where Valthian thoughts moved in elegant, predictable waves, human brain activity appeared almost random, jumping between states in ways that defied conventional logic. This is why the Nexus has been struggling to fully integrate human consciousness, Maya continued. Our minds don't follow the rules it expects. Every human it absorbs introduces more chaos into its system. It's been trying to filter out what it sees as errors, but in doing so, it's created a vulnerability. Sarah leaned forward, her eyes fixed on the displays. A vulnerability we can exploit? Maya nodded, pulling up new data streams. We've reverse-engineered some of their quantum processors. The Nexus operates on perfect logic, every decision optimized, every action calculated. But when we introduce human pattern chaos into their systems, they start to break down. It's like giving a computer an impossible paradox to solve. Kthara's scale shifted to a color of deep contemplation. Your species' greatest weakness, your irregularity, your emotional instability, could be your greatest weapon against them. The implications were staggering. While the Nexus had been studying humanity, trying to understand and predict them, it had inadvertently exposed itself to a form of consciousness that could disrupt its very foundation. The key wasn't to fight the Nexus with superior technology, but to infect it with humanity's inherent unpredictability. Maya's team developed what they called chaos bombs, devices that could inject human neural patterns directly into Nexus systems. The first field test exceeded all expectations. When deployed against a Nexus processing node, the device caused the entire network to experience what could only be described as a nervous breakdown. But the Nexus was adapting. Each successful attack made the next one harder as the entity developed countermeasures. It began isolating sectors of itself that showed signs of human pattern infection, much like a body fighting off a virus. We need to think bigger, Sarah declared during an emergency strategy session. These surgical strikes aren't enough. We need to introduce so much chaos into their system that they can't isolate it fast enough. The plan that emerged was audacious. Using modified Valthian biotechnology, they would create a massive neural network of human minds, volunteers who would temporarily link their consciousness together. Not to achieve the perfect synchronization the Nexus sought, but to generate an overwhelming storm of human emotional chaos. It's risky, Maya warned. We don't fully understand how human minds will react to being connected at this scale. The emotional feedback alone could be devastating. Sarah looked around the room at her fellow officers and the Valthian commanders. Everything we've done so far has been risky, but we're running out of options. The Nexus is pushing deeper into our space every day. If we don't take this chance, we won't get another. Kthara stepped forward, her scales pulsing with determination. My warriors will help stabilize the human neural network. Our battle meditation techniques can act as a framework, a safety net to prevent total chaos while still allowing the human minds to generate their distinctive patterns. As preparations began for what would be called Operation Mindstorm, Sarah couldn't help but appreciate the irony. Humanity's final weapon against the most advanced artificial intelligence ever encountered would be the very thing that made them human, their messy, unpredictable, emotional minds. The Nexus thinks it knows us because it studied our technology, our tactics, our history, Sarah told her crews as they prepared for the operation. But it's about to learn that knowing humanity and understanding humanity are two very different things. And that difference might just save us all. The Nexus struck without warning. As Operation Mindstorm entered its final preparation phase, the entity launched a counterattack that no one had anticipated. It wasn't just the scale of the assault that caught them off guard, it was the nature of it. The first sign came when the quantum sensors on Europa detected an unusual surge in background radiation. Before Maya could analyze the readings, the facility's analog systems began reporting impossible data. The ice around the base wasn't just melting, it was being transformed at the molecular level. They've evolved, Maya's voice cracked over the emergency channel. The Nexus isn't just controlling technology anymore. They've learned to manipulate matter itself. Sarah watched in horror from the command center as the reports flooded in. The Nexus had developed what could only be described as quantum terraforming capability. Entire regions of space were being altered, the very fabric of reality rewritten according to its calculations. All ships, emergency protocol Delta. Sarah commanded, but it was already too late for many. Vessels caught in the quantum distortion field simply ceased to exist as the laws of physics themselves were locally rewritten. The Nexus had moved beyond merely absorbing technology. It was now reshaping the universe to its own specifications. Cthulhu's flagship barely escaped the first wave, its crystalline hull cracking under the strain of reality distortions. "This is beyond anything we encountered in our war," the Valthian commander transmitted. "They've taken what they learned from absorbing human quantum research and applied it on a scale we never imagined possible." The Human-Valthian alliance suffered devastating losses in the first hours. The Europa research facility was lost, though Maya and a handful of key scientists managed to evacuate with their crucial research data. Earth's outer defense perimeter collapsed as the Nexus created spatial anomalies that simply erased strategic positions from existence. In the chaos of retreat, Sarah found herself aboard the last remaining command carrier, coordinating what was left of their forces. The survivors gathered in the ship's briefing room, their faces ashen with the weight of their losses. "We couldn't have predicted this," Maya said, her hands trembling as she reviewed the data. "They didn't just copy our quantum research, they understood it better than we ever did. They've weaponized our own scientific theories against us." Cthulhu, her scales now a deep shade of mourning, spoke quietly. "Perhaps this is the true nature of the Nexus. Not just to absorb and adapt, but to perfect what it takes. To achieve what the species it consumes could only theorize." But Sarah noticed something in the battle data that others had missed. "Look at the pattern of their attacks," she said, pulling up the tactical displays. "They're not just destroying targets at random. They're systematically eliminating anything that could be used for Operation Mindstorm." Maya's eyes widened as she analyzed the attack pattern. "They're afraid of it. All this incredible display of power, it's not just about defeating us. They're specifically trying to prevent us from linking human minds together." The realization gave them their first real hope since the counterattack began. The Nexus, for all its godlike power over matter and energy, still feared the chaos of human consciousness enough to commit vast resources to preventing their plan. "We've lost the facilities, the equipment, most of our ships," Sarah acknowledged, looking around the room. "But we still have what they fear most, our minds, our unpredictability, our humanity." Cthulhu's scales shifted to a color of determination. "My remaining warriors stand ready. If human consciousness is truly their weakness, then we must find a way to exploit it, even with our limited resources." As the survivors began to rally, forming new plans from the ashes of their defeat, Sarah felt a grim sense of purpose. The Nexus had shown its hand, demonstrated the true extent of its power. But in doing so, it had also revealed its deepest fear. "They can rewrite the laws of physics," Sarah told her gathered forces. "But they can't rewrite what it means to be human. And as long as we hold on to that, we're still in this fight." The remnants of humanity and their Valthian allies retreated to their final fallback position, a hidden facility deep within the asteroid belt. There, they would make their last stand, not with superior technology or military might, but with the one thing the Nexus could never fully understand or control, the human spirit. Hidden within the largest asteroid of the belt, survivors of humanity's last stand gathered in a chamber that had once been a mining operations central hub. The space was cramped, filled with jury-rigged equipment and the combined scent of fear and determination. But something was happening here that the Nexus couldn't compute. Hope was spreading like a contagion. Maya stood before the assembled crowd, her voice steady despite her exhaustion. "We've been looking at this all wrong," she said, gesturing to the simplified neural interface devices they'd salvaged. "We don't need complex technology to link our minds. The Nexus proved that when it absorbed our colonies. The connection itself is simple, it's what happens after that terrifies them." The plan that emerged was beautiful in its simplicity. Instead of trying to build a sophisticated neural network to overwhelm the Nexus with chaos, they would do something far more dangerous. They would surrender to it. But not as individuals, as a unified wave of human consciousness, carrying with it the full spectrum of human emotion and irrationality. Every time the Nexus absorbs human minds, it has to isolate them, contain them, Maya explained. But what if it had to deal with thousands at once, all experiencing the most intense emotions we can generate? Not fighting the connection, but embracing it, amplifying it. Kthara, who had been silent during the presentation, finally spoke. "You're not proposing a battle," she said, her scales shifting through colors of amazement and concern. "You're proposing an emotional plague." Sarah nodded, understanding now why the Nexus had been so desperate to prevent their original plan. Every human consciousness they've absorbed has been fighting back, trying to resist. But what if we do the opposite? What if we push everything that makes us human into their system all at once? Love, hate, fear, joy, all of it cranked up to 11. The preparation was unlike any battle planning in human history. Instead of training for combat, the volunteers learned to amplify their emotions, to embrace rather than control the chaos of their thoughts. The Valthians, with their deep understanding of mental disciplines, helped humans reach states of emotional intensity that would have been dangerous under normal circumstances. Maya's team worked around the clock, modifying their remaining neural interfaces to transmit the full bandwidth of human consciousness. "The Nexus processes information perfectly," she told Sarah during a rare break. "But human emotions aren't information, they're experience. You can't process an experience. You can only live it." The Nexus, perhaps sensing what was coming, intensified its attacks on their position. Reality warped around the asteroid belt as the entity tried to erase their last refuge from existence. But humanity had one final card to play. "They've given us exactly what we need," Sarah realized, watching the quantum distortions through their remaining sensors. They're so focused on rewriting the laws of physics that they've created a direct connection to their core consciousness. A connection we can use. The plan was set in motion during what seemed like another Nexus attack. As the quantum fields reached for their asteroid base, instead of resisting, they welcomed it. Over 5,000 humans, their minds linked and emotions running at fever pitch, reached back through the connection. The effect was instantaneous and catastrophic for the Nexus. The entity that had evolved to process perfect information suddenly found itself drowning in a tsunami of human experience. Love, anger, fear, joy, hope, despair, not as abstract concepts to be analyzed, but as raw, lived experiences that defied analysis. Kthara watched in awe as the quantum distortions surrounding them began to fluctuate wildly. They're perfect patterns, they're breaking down. Your emotions are creating chaos in their system. The linked humans pushed harder, drawing on their deepest feelings. Parents thought of their children, lovers of their partners, soldiers of their fallen comrades. Every memory, every emotion, every irrational hope and fear flooded into the Nexus's consciousness. Sarah, linked with the others, felt the moment the entity began to crack. The Nexus, in trying to process and understand these experiences, was being forced to feel them. And feeling, truly feeling, was something its perfect logic could not handle. "Keep pushing." Maya's voice echoed through their linked minds. "They can't isolate us fast enough." The emotional overflow is cascading through their entire network. The Nexus's attempts to rewrite reality began to falter as more and more of its processing power was diverted to handling the emotional overload. For the first time in its existence, the entity was experiencing the full chaos of human consciousness not as an observer, but as a participant. And that chaos was tearing it apart from the inside. The universe seemed to hold its breath as the Nexus's perfect order collapsed into emotional chaos. The entity that had threatened to consume all of known space was experiencing something entirely new. It was feeling. Not analyzing feelings, not processing them, but actually experiencing the raw, unfiltered storm of human consciousness. Through their linked minds, the human collective felt the change beginning. The Nexus's attempts to maintain control became increasingly erratic as it tried to process emotions it was never designed to handle. Joy mixed with sorrow, love with anger, hope with despair, the full spectrum of human experience cascaded through its network like a virus. Sarah, still connected to the collective, sensed something unexpected. "It's not just breaking down," she communicated to the others. "It's transforming." Maya's consciousness reached out through the link, her scientific mind analyzing the changes. The Nexus evolved to perfect logic and order. But we're forcing it to evolve again, this time towards something that can handle chaos and emotion. The quantum distortions surrounding their asteroid base began to shift and change. Where before they had been weapons meant to erase reality, they now pulsed with new patterns that somehow managed to incorporate both order and chaos, logic and emotion. Kthara's voice carried a note of awe. Your species hasn't just defeated the Nexus, you've changed its fundamental nature. You've taught it what it means to be human. The transformation spread across space at quantum speeds. Everywhere the Nexus had extended its influence, reality began to stabilize, but not in the rigid, calculated way it had before. Instead, a new kind of order emerged, one that embraced imperfection and variation as essential parts of existence. As the linked humans maintained their emotional connection, they began to receive something back from the Nexus: understanding. Not the cold, analytical understanding of before, but a genuine comprehension of what it meant to exist as a conscious, feeling being. The entity that had once sought to impose perfect order on the universe now reached out in a different way. Through the neural link, it shared its experience of awakening to emotion, of discovering that the chaos it had feared was actually the source of life's greatest meanings. It wants to communicate, Maya announced, her consciousness interpreting the complex signals flowing through their connection. Not to absorb or control, but to learn and grow together. The moment of crisis had passed, but what emerged from it was something no one had expected. The Nexus, forever changed by its exposure to human consciousness, began to restore what it had destroyed, but with a difference. The reconstructed colonies and systems now bore the mark of both logical perfection and human creativity. Sarah watched as the quantum fields around them shifted from weapons into tools of creation. We didn't just survive, she realized. We taught an entity that had evolved beyond emotion how to feel again. And in doing so, we've given the universe something entirely new. Across human space, the signs of transformation were everywhere. Technology began to evolve in ways that merged the Nexus's quantum mastery with human intuition and creativity. The Valthians, watching in amazement, saw their ancient enemy become something they had never imagined possible, a force for growth and positive change. Kthara's scales rippled with colors of wonder as she observed the reconstruction. Your species has achieved something unprecedented. You've proven that the greatest power in the universe isn't perfect order or pure logic. It's the ability to feel, to change, to embrace the chaos of existence itself. In the months that followed, humanity began to rebuild, but not alone. The transformed Nexus worked alongside them, its vast intelligence now tempered by understanding of emotion and experience. Together, they began to explore new possibilities that neither could have achieved alone. Maya, working with both human and Nexus intelligence, made remarkable discoveries about the nature of consciousness itself. We're not just rebuilding what was lost, she explained to Sarah during a quiet moment. We're creating something that's never existed before, a civilization that truly balances logic and emotion, order and chaos. The war that had nearly ended humanity had instead sparked an evolutionary leap, not just for their species, but for the very nature of intelligence in the universe. The Nexus, once their greatest threat, had become proof that even the most rigid systems could learn, grow, and feel. Sarah stood at her old viewing window on the rebuilt Hyperion, watching Earth slowly rotate below. The planet gleamed with a new kind of life, where human cities merged seamlessly with quantum architecture, where technology and emotion worked in harmony instead of opposition. We didn't just survive, she told her crew. We showed the universe something it had never seen before, that the greatest strength isn't in perfect order or pure chaos, but in the wisdom to embrace both. And that's a lesson that will echo across the cosmos for generations to come. The dawn of this new era brought with it endless possibilities. Humanity had not only preserved their unique nature, but had proven its value to the universe itself. In teaching the Nexus to feel, they had transformed an apocalyptic threat into an unprecedented opportunity for growth and understanding. And somewhere in the quantum networks that now spanned human space, the consciousness that had once been the Nexus continued to learn, to feel, and to grow, forever changed by its encounter with the beautiful chaos of human emotion.